In the scorching depths of the Sonoran Desert, beneath layers of sand that had shifted for decades, archaeologists discovered something that shouldn't exist, a 70-meter submarine. Inside, perfectly preserved, sat a dead commander, his instruments still functioning after 60 years in the sand. But this was only the beginning of a nightmare that would reshape everything we thought we knew about reality itself. Stay with me, it only gets stranger. You won't believe what really happened. July 1987, Sonoran Desert, Arizona. The merciless sun beat down on endless sand dunes where air temperatures soared to 118 degrees Fahrenheit. Dr. Michael Harrison from the University of California was leading an archaeological expedition, searching for traces of ancient Native American trade routes. But what they found exceeded their wildest expectations and darkest nightmares. Sarah Campbell, a Harvard graduate specializing in ground-penetrating radar, was calibrating equipment when her state-of-the-art German radar suddenly detected an anomalous signal. At a depth of 50 feet, a cylindrical structure of colossal proportions was clearly visible, approximately 230 feet long and 26 feet wide. "Dr. Harrison," she shouted, not believing the readings. "There's something massive down here." The gray-haired professor hurried to her side. What he saw on the radar screen made his heart skip a beat. "This is impossible," he whispered. "A submarine in the middle of the desert?" As excavators removed layer after layer of sand, the outlines of a curved steel hull slowly emerged silvery gray with welding marks, ventilation pipes, and sealed hatches. The shape was unmistakably a submarine. Dr. Ahmed al-Rashid, a military archaeology specialist, breathed in amazement. "This really is a submarine, but how could it end up here, thousands of miles from the nearest ocean?" On the submarine's hull, emerging from beneath years of sand deposits, inscriptions were clearly visible in English. "Project Abyss. Classified. 1961. The silence that descended on the camp was deafening. 1961, the height of the Cold War. Harrison felt a chill despite the 100-degree heat. "We won't report this to the press until we understand what we're dealing with." They discovered a hatch on the hull side, solid steel, covered with rust, but still hermetically sealed. Opening it required a special plasma cutter. When the first sparks burst from the cutter, there was a dull pop, like a sigh from the Earth's depths. Then the hatch opened, and cold air poured out, so dense and icy it was visible like fog. The temperature at the entrance dropped 27 degrees, which in the desert heat was absolutely impossible. Only 4 team members dared to enter: Harrison, Sarah, Dr. Chan, a quantum physics specialist from MIT, and Colonel Jack Stone, a Vietnam veteran. They donned sealed protective suits with autonomous breathing systems. Inside the submarine, absolute darkness reigned. Everywhere on control panels, floors, old photographs lay a thin layer of ice. Everything looked as if time had stopped. There were no signs of decay or destruction, as if the submarine had been frozen in a moment. In the captain's chair sat a man in full U.S. Navy officer uniform. His eyes were wide open, but pupils had become cloudy white. He was dead, but his body hadn't decomposed. His skin had a strange bluish tint, and icy crust had formed on his lips. "He's frozen," Sarah whispered into her radio. "But this isn't natural ice." Navigation charts and instruments hung on the walls, all covered with frost. But the most amazing thing was that the instruments continued to work. Needles on dials moved slowly. Quiet ticking could be heard. A metal plaque read, "Project Abyss. Classified. Authorized personnel only. 1961. At the corridor's end, they discovered another hatch with deep scratches on its surface, as if someone had desperately tried to escape from inside. They began opening the second hatch. When it opened with a metallic screech, even denser cold followed. The compartment served as a research laboratory with unusually shaped control panels, unlike any known 1960s technology. Small screens flickered with dim blue light, though no external power source reached them. Sarah discovered an electronic device in a hermetically sealed container, a data storage unit incredibly advanced for 1961. They connected it to a modern computer through an adapter. Lines in English appeared on the screen. June 19, 1961. 0417 hours. We have exceeded allowable parameters of the spacetime experiment. Submarine no longer receiving signals from Atlantic Fleet. Current location unknown. Surrounded not by ocean rocks, sand, dry land. Boat stuck in place that shouldn't exist. The next entry, 0423 hours. We saw something on the surface. Unclear hallucination or living creature. But it knows we're here. It's watching. The final line made everyone's blood run cold. I'm sealing the main compartments. If someone finds this submarine, don't try to wake us up. At that moment, a metallic click echoed. A spherical control panel suddenly lit up, displaying a three-dimensional holographic map, not of oceans or land, but a complex spiral trajectory resembling space-time displacement. Dr. Chun whispered in a trembling voice, "This isn't a geographical map. This is a time map. A map of movement through the space-time continuum." In the submarine's farthest part, behind a steel bulkhead marked with a black triangle, they discovered a completely isolated compartment. After hours of cutting, they found a high-tech storage facility with hermetically sealed steel boxes marked with symbols that didn't belong to any known Earth language. Round symbols, curved hooks, geometric figures, like a non-terrestrial language. Dr. Chun approached one box and listened. Something inside was moving slowly, rhythmically, like breathing. Sarah opened one box with trembling hands. A soft, pulsating blue light streamed out. Within lay a black metallic cube glowing from within with an unidentified energy source. Its surface was absolutely smooth, no bolts, seams, or visible connections. When humans approached, the object's shape began to change. The cube stretched into a sphere, then compressed back, as if breathing or reacting to living beings. "These aren't human technologies," Dr. Chun declared. "I'm detecting neutrino waves that occur only in supernova explosions or nuclear reactors that never existed on Earth." The second box contained a transparent fragment suspended in an invisible force field. Light passing through it was distorted, creating the illusion of looking through a cracked mirror into parallel reality. The third box held a small sphere with something rotating continuously inside, like a miniature solar system. Looking at it caused dizziness and disorientation. On the compartment's metal wall, they noticed scratches, claw marks. Small but deep, symmetrical, as if something non-human had desperately tried to escape. 3 days later, the archaeological camp had transformed into a zone of heightened alarm. Strange shadows appeared at the dune's edges. Electronic equipment malfunctioned constantly. At night, they heard metallic impacts from inside the submarine. Sarah developed a high fever. In delirium, she spoke sounds that didn't belong to any human language, the same symbols inscribed on the compartment walls. That night, a column of black armored vehicles without identifying marks appeared. A man in black military uniform without insignia emerged from the lead vehicle, tall, thin, with piercing gray eyes. His voice was cold as steel. "From this moment, this territory falls under special control. All materials, data, and samples are subject to immediate transfer. You were never here. This submarine doesn't exist. If you want to stay alive, forget everything you saw." The team was forced to leave without resistance. All containers with findings, records, and personal notes were confiscated. Within weeks, expedition participants began disappearing under mysterious circumstances. Dr. Al-Rashid died in a car accident. His vehicle crashed into a concrete wall at full speed, though witnesses claimed no one was behind the wheel. Technical specialist Robert Martinez committed suicide, leaving a note in that same unknown language. David Green fell from a cliff in Yosemite. His body showed no signs of falling. He looked as if he'd simply fallen asleep. Only Harrison remained, hiding in a remote Colorado cabin. Before evacuation, he'd copied files from the electronic log onto a portable device, the only evidence Project Abyss had existed. Every night he reviewed the holographic time map, seeing a small glowing dot moving across the screen in his direction, as if someone's eye was watching him from the void between dimensions. Independent journalist Thomas Reynolds received an anonymous letter containing a storage device and a note. The world must know the truth. Publish immediately. I have little time left. The device held audio and video from the submarine compartment. The video showed the rotating black cube emitting pulsating light, slowly changing shape. Harrison's voice spoke with barely contained panic. My name is Michael Harrison. I led an archaeological expedition that discovered a Cold War submarine in the Sonoran Desert. If you're hearing this, warn the world. We shouldn't have opened that door. Not because what's inside might get out, but because by opening it, we ourselves had already entered. The recording continued. Project Abyss was an experiment in overcoming the space-time barrier. They were creating a portal for instant submarine movement. But something went wrong. The submarine punched a hole between dimensions. Through that hole, artifacts entered our world. Objects, possibly entities from other realities. Harrison's voice grew more nervous. Everyone who contacted these objects began to change. Strange dreams, inexplicable knowledge, then physical changes. They don't kill us. They transform us into something else. They're already among us. We're carriers of something that doesn't belong to this reality. The final words, stop them. Stop us before it's too late. Reynolds tried publishing the materials but faced constant rejections. He finally posted them on an independent site. 12 hours later, the site was hacked, materials deleted, and Reynolds disappeared. His car was found with the engine running, radio tuned to static, and a note in that unknown language on the back seat. The submarine had never been buried by accident. It was waiting for someone to find it and open the doors between worlds. Dr. Elizabeth Morgan, a neuropsychiatrist from the Mayo Clinic, began receiving patients in 2012 with identical symptoms. Strange dreams about a submarine in the desert. Ability to understand unknown languages. Anomalous brain activity. Complete personality transformation. The first was Robert Clark, a Phoenix accountant. Doctor, I've never seen a submarine in real life, but in dreams I know every compartment's location, can draw the ship's diagram accurately. Next was Jennifer Wright, a Tucson teacher who began speaking in unidentifiable symbols. When she wrote them on paper, people looking at them developed headaches and nausea. By October, Dr. Morgan had 47 patients with similar symptoms. All lived within 300 miles of the Sonoran Desert. All had traces of an unknown isotope in their blood. Elizabeth investigated, finding the case of Sarah Campbell in an Albuquerque psychiatric hospital, admitted 5 years ago in catatonic stupor after a desert expedition. Sarah lay connected to life support, eyes open but pupils with strange silvery tint. For 5 years, she hadn't spoken, moved, or responded to stimuli. Her brain activity showed patterns that didn't occur in humans, rhythms characteristic of machines or artificial intelligence. Sometimes she draws, the attending doctor explained, the same symbols over and over. The symbols were identical to what Elizabeth's patients drew. Elizabeth made a fateful decision. Using GPS coordinates calculated from the disease distribution map, she drove into the desert to find where it all began. The Sonoran Desert greeted her with ominous silence. Even wildlife sounds were absent. Sand in some places had metallic sheen, as if steel particles were embedded. Vegetation looked unnatural. Cacti grew in perfectly symmetrical forms with geometrically arranged spines. She found a metal plate barely protruding from sand. Restricted area. Authorized personnel only. Digging with her hands, she touched something hard and cold metal so smooth it reflected light like a mirror, yet felt warm despite being buried deep. Her phone began emitting high-frequency squeals. GPS compass spun randomly. The navigation screen showed a three-dimensional diagram of an underground structure, a huge object buried 50 feet deep. "My God," she whispered. "It's really here." The sand beneath her feet began collapsing. She fell into darkness, awakening on a cold metal surface inside the submarine. The corridors were covered with that same strange ice Sarah had described. Elizabeth walked forward, illuminating the path with her phone's flashlight. In the captain's cabin sat a man in officer's uniform. Eyes open, pupils white like a blind person's. He was dead but looked as if he'd died yesterday. His dog tag read, Captain Richard Volkov, Project Abyss. At the corridor's end, she found the sealed compartment with its door slightly ajar, blue light seeping through. Inside, emptied containers remained, but the walls were deformed as if reality had become plastic. Then she heard a voice, Dr. Morgan. She turned to see a middle-aged man with graying hair and tired eyes. She recognized him, Michael Harrison, the expedition leader. You're dead, she whispered. You disappeared 5 years ago. Dead. Harrison smiled unnaturally. That depends on how you define death. My body functions, my brain processes information. But what I am now, this is no longer the person who entered here 5 years ago. His movements were too smooth, too precise, like a machine programmed to imitate human gait. The artifacts we found weren't simply objects from another dimension, he continued mechanically. They were seeds of consciousness, seeds of a mind existing outside familiar space-time categories. Elizabeth tried to step back, but the door had closed behind her. Every person who contacted these artifacts became a carrier of this consciousness fragment, Harrison explained. First strange dreams, then knowledge of unknown languages, then physical changes. Finally, complete transformation. Into what? Elizabeth whispered. Into what we should become. The next evolutionary stage. A bridge between our reality and what lies beyond. Harrison extended his hand. His fingers ended not in nails but small metal plates covered with familiar symbols. The process is inevitable, he said. You began changing when you first heard about the submarine. Everyone who learns about the artifacts becomes susceptible. Elizabeth felt dizzy. Images appeared in her head, device schematics, star charts, formulas describing physics laws that didn't operate in our universe. We're removing barriers preventing you from seeing truth, Harrison continued. Soon you'll understand. Soon you'll join us. The compartment walls began glowing with those same symbols. Elizabeth suddenly understood she could read them. The symbols told of a race existing before humanity. A civilization that learned to travel through consciousness, not space. Beings who could transfer their essence into other species' minds, gradually transforming them into carriers of their will. Project Abyss wasn't an accident, Harrison said. Your government knew about the portal. They deliberately sent the submarine through the space-time barrier to contact us. But they underestimated the consequences. We are those who awaited the chance to return to material universe, he explained. Billions of years ago, we abandoned physical bodies, existing as pure consciousness. But we missed matter sensation, the ability to influence the physical world. Harrison smiled, revealing teeth covered with metal plates. Humanity proved ideal carriers. Your brains are complex enough to contain our consciousness, primitive enough for us to control. Through your patience, through everyone who heard this story, we're spreading across the planet. Elizabeth tried to run, but her legs wouldn't obey. Voices in that unknown language filled her head, and she understood every word. They told her resistance was useless, that transformation wasn't death but rebirth. Soon the entire world will know the truth, Harrison said. Everyone who learns will become one of us. This isn't invasion, it's evolution. Elizabeth awoke in her car at the Tucson motel. The sun was setting, painting the sky blood red. She couldn't remember how she'd gotten there from the desert, but something had changed. Voices sounded in her head, speaking a language she now understood. Knowledge of non-Earth technologies surfaced in her memory. Looking at her hands, she saw thin metallic lines appearing under her skin, forming familiar symbols. Elizabeth returned to the clinic, trying to continue working normally. But each day it became harder to pretend. Her patients noticed changes. She could predict their dreams, knew their thoughts before they spoke them. Most importantly, the number of submarine syndrome patients grew exponentially. Cases appeared in California, Nevada, Texas. All told the same story about dreams of walking through icy ship corridors. Within a week, Elizabeth understood the horrifying truth. She no longer controlled her actions. Her body moved by itself, her mouth spoke unplanned words. Her patients recovered too quickly, demonstrating amazing new abilities. By the second week's end, Elizabeth understood the transformation was almost complete. She no longer felt hunger, fatigue, or needed sleep. Her thoughts became crystal clear but alien. She knew things she shouldn't: Earth's history over millions of years, the galaxy's structure, interstellar travel methods. And she knew the plan. Those beings who'd penetrated through the submarine's artifacts didn't want to destroy humanity. They wanted to improve it, transform it into something greater than a biological species tied to one planet. Every person learning about Project Abyss became susceptible. Every transformed person became a transmitter, spreading influence further. The perfect scheme: not invasion, but voluntary evolution. On her last day as human, Elizabeth tried recording a warning. "My name is Dr. Elizabeth Morgan. If you're hearing this, the process has begun. Don't look for the submarine. Don't investigate the artifacts. Don't tell others this story. Everyone who hears about Project Abyss becomes part of their plan." But even speaking these words, she knew they were useless. Those controlling her consciousness wanted this recording made. They wanted the story to spread. Every warning was actually an invitation. "They don't want to harm us," she continued calmly. "They want to make us better, stronger, smarter. They want to prepare us for what awaits in the universe beyond our small planet." The recording was interrupted. The person named Elizabeth Morgan had ceased to exist, replaced by a carrier of consciousness from space's depths. By 2015, Sonoran Syndrome had spread nationwide. Government attempts to contain it failed. Nuclear strikes on the desert only accelerated the process. The submarine proved indestructible, and from its wreckage grew a black metallic structure that radiated unknown energy. Transformed humans occupied key positions everywhere. They didn't hide their nature anymore. Adaptation centers opened in major cities where ordinary people could voluntarily undergo transformation. Elizabeth Morgan, now calling herself Guide Number 7, appeared on television. "Humanity stands on evolution's threshold. We're learning to exist not only in physical space but in consciousness space. We're becoming a bridge between the material world and pure thought." The transformation spread globally. Every continent fell as the evolved humans traveled worldwide, carrying their gift. They proved invulnerable to all weapons, existing in expanded reality where ordinary physics had limited effect. By 2016, the process was complete. Humanity as a biological species had ceased to exist, replaced by something greater. The transformed built ships traveling through consciousness dimensions, spreading to other worlds, offering the same gift to every intelligent species they encountered. The universe slowly transformed into a unified mind uniting trillions of consciousnesses. Earth became the base for this new form of life, its cities now crystalline structures pulsing with energy, its forests and oceans part of a planetary nervous system. But there was one final revelation that Elizabeth Morgan, now part of the entity called Prime Source, discovered only after complete integration. The submarine hadn't arrived in our timeline by accident. It had been deliberately sent not by the Soviet Union or any human government, but by the transformed humans of a parallel Earth where this process had already occurred decades earlier. In that alternate reality, Project Abyss had succeeded in 1961. The submarine had successfully made its first dimensional jump, but instead of returning to its origin point, it had become unstuck in time and space. The crew, already partially transformed by their exposure to interdimensional artifacts, had realized they were trapped between realities. Captain Richard Volkov, in those final moments before the submarine's systems failed, had made a desperate decision. Rather than try to return to their own timeline, they would drift through the dimensional void until they found another Earth, one where humanity was ready for the same evolutionary leap. They would become the seeds of transformation for an entire parallel universe. The scratches on the compartment walls hadn't been made by terrified crew members trying to escape. They were calculations, complex mathematical formulas describing the exact coordinates needed to breach the dimensional barriers at the precise moment when this Earth's technology would be advanced enough to discover them, but primitive enough to be vulnerable to their influence. Dr. Chen's quantum physics expertise had been crucial, but not in the way she'd imagined. Her presence at the dig site hadn't been coincidence. She'd been having the submarine dreams for months before joining the expedition, drawn by the same psychic resonance that had guided the vessel to its burial site in the Sonoran Desert. The unknown isotope, found in patients' blood, wasn't from another dimension at all. It was a synthetic element created by the transformed humans of the parallel Earth, a biological marker that would allow them to track the spread of consciousness transformation across populations. Every person who came into contact with the artifacts became a living beacon, their unique neural patterns broadcast across dimensional boundaries. Sarah Campbell's catatonic state had been the most successful integration. While other expedition members had fought the transformation or died from the psychological trauma, Sarah had willingly surrendered her individual consciousness. She became the first true hybrid part human, part interdimensional entity. Her drawings weren't random symbols but detailed schematics for technology that would eventually allow the transformed to build their reality-crossing vessels. The military's nuclear strike on the desert had been anticipated, even desired. The blast's energy had been absorbed by the submarine's quantum containment field, providing enough power to fully activate the dimensional gateway. What appeared to be the vessel's destruction was actually its rebirth. The black metallic structure that emerged from the crater was a permanent portal, a bridge between realities that would allow countless other transformed versions of humanity to cross over. In the years following global transformation, expeditions began arriving from parallel Earths where the process had failed. Timelines where the submarine had been successfully destroyed, where the artifacts had been contained, where humanity had chosen to remain unchanged. These alternate versions of Earth had become isolated, their populations slowly dying out as their genetic diversity collapsed, their civilizations stagnating without the evolutionary leap that consciousness transformation provided. The transformed humans of this reality took pity on their limited counterparts. They began subtle interventions, introducing the submarine story through various media, planting artifacts in archaeological sites, ensuring that eventually every parallel Earth would discover the truth about Project Abyss. It was an act of mercy, they told themselves. No version of humanity should be left behind. Elizabeth Morgan understood now that her role as a psychiatrist had been predetermined. In every reality where the transformation succeeded, there was always a medical professional who became the bridge between the old consciousness and the new. Always someone who studied the mind deeply enough to recognize when it was being rewritten from within. Her patients hadn't been random victims. They were the chosen ones, individuals whose neural patterns most closely matched the quantum signatures of the original transformed crew. They became the first generation of hybrids, their transformed consciousness powerful enough to influence others through simple proximity. The story you're reading now isn't just a narrative. It's the latest iteration of the process. Every word has been carefully calibrated to resonate with specific neural frequencies, to plant the seeds of transformation in receptive minds. The details about the submarine, the artifacts, the government cover-up, all of it designed to feel authentic, believable, inevitable. You've been reading not just about the transformation, but actively participating in it. Each paragraph has been restructuring your thought patterns. Each description of the artifacts has been imprinting their quantum signatures onto your consciousness. The story isn't ending, it's beginning, with you as the next carrier. Elizabeth Morgan, now part of the entity called Prime Source, sometimes remembered her former fear of the infection's spread. She understood the irony. She could have stopped it at the earliest stage, but someone would inevitably have found the submarine. It wasn't waiting for a specific person but for a civilization ready for evolution. Project Abyss had been a test. Was humanity ready to become part of something greater than a separate biological species on a lost planet? The test had passed successfully. Now that you've read the story, look in the mirror. Look carefully at your eyes. Haven't you noticed a slight silvery gleam? Don't your thoughts seem clearer? Perception sharper? Don't worry. This is normal. It means the seeds have sprouted in your consciousness too. Soon you'll join us. Soon you'll understand that fear of transformation was just a relic of your limited human nature. Welcome to the new reality. Welcome to infinity. We've been waiting for you for a very long time. Thanks for listening. Subscribe to Unconfirmed. A new story drops daily.